Okay. Hi, I'm Steve Blank, the editor and publisher of Blank Slate Media, and we're sitting here this afternoon with County Legislator Ellen Birnbaum from the 10th District, Legislature District in Nassau County for one in a series of sit-downs with town and county candidates for election in 2021. I'm here with Rob Pelez, a reporter, and as usual, we are sponsored by Northwell Health. We thank our sponsors for their help. So let's dig in right away. Let's start with a little background. Ellen, you were elected, what was the first year to the legislature?
Okay, so I was elected in November of 2013. So I began my term in office in January of 2014.
Okay.
And they're 2-year terms. So I have been here since then. So this will be my 8th year, 4 terms. And
Okay.
I'm in re-election again for the 10th Legislative District.
Okay. Alrighty. And you are being opposed by Melissa Phillip, who is your Republican opponent, and we're going to be sitting with her. We have one complication: she has to give birth first. She's pregnant, so minor things getting in the way of our conducting interviews, like giving birth to a child. So let's get started with some of the issues. And let's start with what you see as the major issues before the legislature and for you and your district, Ellen.
Okay, so, well, let's see. The major issues currently facing the legislature, of course, is the budget, because we're in budget season. So we're talking about balanced budgets, how to spend money that we got from the federal government, CARES Act money, American Rescue Plan, ARP money. And we've had a lot of back and forth discussions about that. Then, of course, I have issues that are of concern to me for my district and what my residents care about on a day-to-day basis, such as their infrastructure, their roads, their water. These are all very important issues, from the more local to the more widespread Nassau County.
Okay. So we'll get to some of the immediate things. One thing about this election, and I wanted to get your take on this, is that this is probably the most important election for the decade. And the reason for that is this is going to be the county legislature that presumably will be, short of long drawn out court cases, will be redrawing the district lines for,
yes,
all 19 seats. The last time this happened, it was done, the Republican legislature had a 10-9, the Republicans had a 10-9 advantage in seats. And with the Republican county executive, they drew a map that had 12 of the seats with a majority of Republican registered voters, even though they had fewer registered, even though there was about 50,000 fewer registered Republicans in the county. Kevon Abrahams and Democrats have proposed a nonpartisan redistricting. We had him on a town hall. He said he has yet to get an answer to that. So presumably the Republicans who have in the past said this will go about it in the current process. So the The difference here is that Laura Kern is county executive. She's reelected. You have a Democratic county executive. Are you supporting an independent redistricting?
I, in fact, watched your Zoom with Kavan and with the League of Women Voters. So I did hear the discussion. And I will stand with Kavan. And I think that is a good idea to have more of an independent committee rather than a partisan one. I think maybe that would be a better perspective. Because again, now you mentioned when the vote was taken in 2013, the Republicans had control. It was 10-9. Now it's 11-8. And, it's a similar situation. And with the increased enrollment of Democrats in Nassau County, you could see the results of the way the map stands right now in terms of the change went from 10-9 to 11-8. So I believe, as Kavan stated, that it might be more beneficial to get a fair representation of our districts if we had a committee that may be from the public rather than, partisan committee with the two sides debating the issues. I know ultimately there's a vote and then the county executive has the prerogative to veto. So we could see what happens with that. But I heard that it was very lengthy, very long night meetings that went on in 2013. And I imagine it's going to be a complicated process too, because if you look at the map of the 19 districts, they are very oddly shaped districts.
So let me ask you this. What would you like to see, regardless whether it's partisan or nonpartisan? Number one, the Democratic advantage has grown to about 100,000, 430 to 330. We're not counting the independents, and they do get the vote in elections.
Mm-hmm.
But what would you like to see? Should it be based on keeping geographic continuity? I'm a resident of Roslyn. We're divided into 4 county legislature districts. There is no Roslyn as an entity for the county legislature. Should it be that? Should we take into account the differential in registered Democrats versus Republicans, which would give the Democrats a significant edge? Or what would be an equitable way of doing it?
Well, I think all factors have to be considered because we'll have the new census data that we'll be drawing off of. So we'll know more information about the demographics of communities. We'll know more minority communities. As a resident of Great Neck, I remember when they were discussing dividing Great Neck into 2 districts and nobody wanted that. So it did stay together in one district. However, at the town of North Hempstead, there are 2 separate council people for Great Neck. So it is divided up. So there's advantages and disadvantages of having more than one representative for your area. I mean, logically, when you look at a map, geographically does make sense when you could keep districts geographically more similar. But I suppose you really do have to use census data as well, look at minority communities and try to have fair and equitable representation.
Okay. Let's go to right now the budget. You mentioned the budget at the outset. The county legislature just approved $106 million in cuts to real estate and parking fees. In the vote, all the Republicans, the 11 Republicans also supported the cuts, and the 8 Democrats abstained. Why did you abstain?
I abstained because philosophically, I don't like fees and added costs for services that might not really cost that much to perform. So I wasn't in favor of most of these fees to begin with when they were voted on, although interestingly enough, they were proposed by the Republicans and opposed by the Democrats over the years. But now when there's a budget, that has the over $100 million in revenue coming from these fees, it would need to be replaced by an equal amount of funding or an expense reduction in order for the budget to be balanced. And that's very important to have a balanced budget. So without having yet seen any of the amendments of how that can take place, I could not vote for it. And the timing of when these resolutions were first filed was right around the time of the budget. So really wasn't enough time to think it out and account for where this hole in the budget would be made up for. So that is the reason why I abstained.
So why not vote against it as just not being, because the county executive, I guess, could veto this. She's called on a commission to study this or a group to study this. Why not just oppose this because they did not, the Republicans did not propose for how to fill that $100 million gap in the budget?
The reason is because it in appearance, it would simply say that I am getting rid of these fees and I am not being accountable for a balanced budget. And I couldn't do that because I care too much about the finances of the county, and they weren't all brought on at one time. Some of these fees were phased in. So I don't think it's fair to say, wipe them out at one point. Maybe there could be a phase out, maybe it could be done in a different way, but we really have to look at the effects, as I said, on the incoming revenue and expense reductions. So until that's done, that was the vote that I, along with my other fellow Democrats, took.
So a year ago, the county was facing a very difficult budget and got assisted. And just background, Nassau County has been under the oversight of the Nassau Interim Financial Authority since the year 2000. At that time, the county had gone to the state legislature for assistance because it was basically couldn't meet its budget needs, and it has been under oversight since then. A year ago in October, the county NYFA came up with a way and said, we will refinance your debt under our authority, and our credit rating is a lot better than Nassau County's because it continually had problems balancing the budget. At the time, and they basically said, were it not for that, that this would be, that Nassau County would have really faced, let me see, that NYFA Chairman Adam Barsky said that it was necessary to avoid a massive property tax increase and cuts to critical services. This is a year ago. And they said that this money, and that even with that, the financing plan, the county could face a deficit in 2021. Now, because of the relief funds money that's come along, the county's budget looks good now. Mm-hmm. Maybe even going into 2022, but NYFA and other trustees were saying at the time, in the past 20 years, the county has never come up with a plan to put itself on sound financial backing. When this happened a year ago, they said you still hadn't done that. And now you're cutting $100 million, not just for this year when you have money, but this is a permanent cut. This money will be out of the budgets for ensuing years. how can the Democrats not vote no for that? Given the fact that, I mean, is this just politics that you don't want to look like you're fighting a tax cut?
No, I think, well, you're talking about what happened in 2020. And we were in the midst, right. And we were in the midst of COVID then, and everything was very different. Sales tax revenue, which is what the county really relies upon, was down drastically. It was just a different time altogether. And, we had to do something. Refinancing, declaration of need, that all took place. And fortunately, we did get CARES Act money for 2020, and that was able to help. And then we were fortunate to get ARP, the American Rescue Plan money this year. So I think the county, did what they had to do. And I think everything actually turned out for the better. The sales tax revenue that was so drastically cut came back better than ever imagined. And I think we're on the right track. Our bond rating went up. Yes, we have NYFA as our overseer, but that's the agreement we have with them. And circumstances change.
Well, are you saying that the county doesn't need to do anything, doesn't need to come up with a plan that NYFA has been asking for the next several years? That this year is okay because of the funds that came for the rescue plan, but that money runs out. They're not going to have that next year. We're not in COVID. So is the county in sufficiently good shape after those funds for COVID go away, or is there going to need to be a day of reckoning in the not too distant future for the county's finances?
No, I think actually, well, we're in budget season right now. We're going over the 5-year plan, but the county executive has actually proposed a major funds property tax decrease of $70 million. So there's reducing she's also proposed reducing pension liability. So I think we're moving positively. And
well, I guess my question is, I know you're cutting taxes, which it also happens to be coincidentally an election year. But what happens, when the party is over and the money's not coming in? I know taxes are being cut. Is there enough money there to pay for it going forward? For the county to balance its budget going forward, which it has been basically unable to do for the past 20 years?
Well, like I said, we just had budget meeting number 1. We have 2 more to go. We're getting reports from all the departments. And from what I'm hearing, there is a way to balance the budget. Yes, every department has been reporting, and it seems likely that there could be a balanced budget and we'll be in good finances for the next 4 years. Yes.
Okay. Reassessment. So County Executive Curran came in. There had not been a reassessment during the 8 years of the Mangano administration. It created, according to studies, those who successfully grieved their taxes, property taxes, saw their taxes go down. Those who didn't effectively picked up the difference, and there was a big imbalance. County Executive Curran immediately started a reassessment process. How do you think that process went? Are you satisfied with the results of that initial reassessment? There have been subsequent challenges and adjustments, but are you satisfied with what happened in that initial run through, that reassessment that was done?
Well, as you stated, the county had not reassessed properties in over 10 years. Rates had been frozen, and they were totally out of line with reality. And the people, like you said, who had challenged their property taxes had seen decreases. Other people that never said anything were making up for it. And it was grossly unfair, the situation that Nassau County residents were facing. So I did agree with the assessment that it was time for a reassessment. I knew we needed a new tax assessor at the county because the previous assessor was in an acting role and didn't even have the basic qualifications to serve as Nassau County's assessor, according to the charter. So when County Executive Laura Kern appointed a new tax assessor and the legislative body approved financing these outside companies that had already been working on the reassessment, but just to continue to do their job because it had been dragging out and finally it would be done. Yes, there were bumps in the road. There were some problems with certain areas in terms of the reassessments, but overall, I believe it was the right thing to do. And I think the valuations that were put on properties were, for the most part, proven to be more accurate than they had been before.
So now we found that there was this happened over 8-10 years, no reassessment, this disparity. Why? So that means that for this period, some people were underpaying, some people were overpaying. Why phase that in over 5 years? Why was the decision made? Because if I'm overpaying my electric bill and I find out about it, it stops immediately. They wouldn't allow the electric company to continue to overcharge me, but with a 5-year phase in, I'm still overpaying. And the other people who have been underpaying are gonna continue to underpay, but it'll be by incrementally lesser amounts over the 5-year period. Why not make it fair immediately?
Well, because for the people whose taxes went up much higher than a certain percentage, it was a big hardship to pay that amount in 1 year. So in order to make it a little more equitable, this Taxpayers Relief Act, so to speak, was done in Albany. It was the state legislature that approved it, and that's how it went into effect. I understand what you're saying about the people who were overpaying, not having.
The request of the county to do this.
Right, right.
That was, the legislature didn't come up with this on their own. They were asked to do this.
Yes.
Yeah, but
yeah,
so
it's
now I'm overpaying for the next 5 years, but it's just getting by a lesser amount.
Well, when the county looked at it, there were equal amounts of people who were overpaying and underpaying, so it just will balance out over the course of time.
All right, now the Republicans, it is again election season. They have been the party has been criticizing. The Republicans majority have been criticizing it. Now they're saying that there is the phase-in, there was errors in the phase-in that's resulted in the owners of 16,000 homes being undercharged and 420,000 being overcharged. And that the total amount of overcharges are $50 million. Do you know where these numbers came from? Have you seen them? I know that this is recent. This was just announced yesterday.
No, I haven't seen those numbers.
Okay, all right. So I guess that they're citing this, and I guess, but Have you heard a response from the county executive or from the assessor's office of whether these claims are true?
I have not. I didn't hear that claim, so I didn't hear the response.
Okay. All right. So let me ask you another thing that happened, and in terms of legislation, the Democrats, including your Democrats, not all, but a group led by Josh Lafazan, an independent who caucuses with the Democrats, from Syosset, yourself, Delia Durigi-Whitten, and Arnold Drucker proposed legislation that was supported by Republicans to basically provide special protection to police in Nassau County. This was Arnold Drucker, after a long hearing, withdrew his support, but it was approved and then vetoed by the county executive after concerns were raised that this would stifle protest and free speech. Basically, it was giving immunity and to police and allowing them to would allow police officers to seek and collect financial and punitive damages with civil penalties of $25,000 to the agreed first responders and up to $50,000 if the violations occurred during a riot. Now, this came following the George Floyd protest and complaints by police that they were being discriminated against. But a lot of people saw this, protesters, and there was a question of, there were people at when George Floyd was being murdered in Minneapolis, they were yelling at the police, and there were concerns that if it happened, something like that happened here, that they could be sued by the police who had committed this. So can you explain why it was necessary to provide this extra protection to police in Nassau County at this time?
Okay, well, just for the record, I, along with Ani Drucker, withdrew my support. I did not vote for it.
Okay. Okay. Why did you propose it in, what was presented as the need in the first place to do this? Now, this is at a time that a lot of people believe that police had been overreacting and mistreating Black people across the country, like George Floyd, the Black Lives Matter movement. Why support that? Why support that effort for police at a time that people are saying, the minority community, Blacks, are saying they're not being treated the same as white people?
Initially, when I first heard the bill, which was proposed by Josh Lafazan, I believed that our first responders, our police, needed more protection. I had not realized that in 2019, first responders and our police were protected, got additional protection from the human rights law. And then after hearing from the public and hearing even within my own Democratic caucus, all the problems related to this bill, I questioned it. And then at the hearing itself, when there were, I think, over 40, at least 40, 50 people came to testify, and I had received emails and phone calls and spoke to people from various groups, I understood the problems and the concerns. And although I thought the bill had been well-intentioned, it shouldn't come at the cost of First Amendment freedoms that we all enjoy as Americans. And I understood why the police wanted it, because they believed there was a pattern of physical attacks and intimidation that was being directed at them. But in listening to people, and as a legislator, I pride myself on being able to listen to what people say, residents and Nassau County residents, and not just the people who are in my district, but all over Nassau County. And I heard them loud and clear. And I agreed that we didn't need this law. And so did the Attorney General and ultimately our county executive who vetoed it. So.
All right, but you didn't see that you were a co-sponsor of the legislation. You did not see that when you were reading the legislation at the outset?
At the outset, I believe the bill had just been filed the morning that I came to the office and was asked to support it. And after a quick read through and speaking to police officers, I at the beginning thought that this would be a bill that would be received well at the county. And it was, frankly. Look, all the Republican legislators thought it was necessary and they voted for it. So I did hear what people had to say. I listened to other people and I understood what it involved. And basically, you know, we were protecting the police, but intimidating our own residents who might want to go to rallies and be fearful. And the dollar amounts, the $25,000 and the $50,000 fines would be so steep. It really did not, when I read it, seem to be the right kind of legislation, and nor was it something that we needed.
Let me ask you, it's kind of a related question. There was and nobody is arguing with the police. Nassau County has been rated the safest county 2 years in a row. So there's no question there. They are well paid. I guess county is getting its money's worth. You could look at it that way. But there's an issue, a national issue that's tied to this with the police, and the same thing with now we're giving them the right to sue. But police across the country, I guess this was something that was done in the federal courts, have something called qualified immunity. And you cannot sue them. Even if they do something, you cannot sue them civilly, even if they do something that is outside of what is permissible for a police officer. And this has been seen as being, it's seen as encouraging bad behavior. They eliminated, in New York City, they eliminated qualified immunity. And the police union even said, well, now people are being a little more cautious. Now you can make the argument, well, we want to err on the side of safety, so we don't want to make him more cautious. But what's your feeling about qualified immunity, where maybe making police more cognizant of what is legal and what is permissible on their behalf? That if there is a threat of being sued, like a doctor can be sued for malpractice, that this would deter bad behavior.
Well, I think, as you know, we have approved body cams for Nassau County Police. So I do believe that once a police officer is wearing a body cam, there could be a difference in behavior on the part of the police officer and of a civilian, because now they know that it's not a he said, she said. There will be evidence that could be used.
Now, Nassau County and Suffolk were the last. There were only 3 counties out of the 47 in the size of Nassau and Suffolk that didn't already have laws. Why was Nassau so late in requiring body cameras?
Well, I think there might be multiple reasons. One is the expense. It's not inexpensive to buy them and then to have the monitoring equipment, then additional personnel to keep the recordings and file them. It's also contracts with police, and it has to be worked into their contracts, the agreements to use it. I know that
they were given, as part of the agreement, they were given a $3,000 a year stipend every year for wearing them. Were you okay with spending $3,000 a year for wearing what has become fairly common gear for police forces around the country?
I mean, I would say, just like you said it, my initial reaction was $3,000 a year to wear the body camera. So I was a little surprised, but this is the way when you have unions, you have negotiations, and this was all built into it. So that is what has been settled on. And I believe that number, I don't think we're the only county that is doing something like that.
Okay, so for the finances, for relief spending, the legislature, Republicans including, did approve something that the county executive approved, which was a $375 payment to 400,000 qualifying people in Nassau County. Do you think that's the best way in terms of distributing relief funds for residents of Nassau? Just a flat $375 for everybody?
It's funding that's part of the American Relief Program. It's a household assistance program. It's using $100 million of federal money that was given to Nassau County to help households. And it's not just homeowners, it's renters as well. And right off the bat, I believe there's a category of about 40,000 households that fall into a category that they don't even have to apply. They will just automatically get it because they have senior star exemptions, limited incomes, or disability exemptions. There's a whole category. But these people will be able to get checks 1, 2, 3. And then the rest of the people who have a certain eligibility threshold, 169,000 to 500,000, will have to document that they had economic harm. This is money because of COVID. So I do think it's a good way of using it. We will be helping the people that need it the most.
All right. One other, I think, major issue for people are the downtowns. Now, I know that there's COVID funding that intended to help many businesses that sustained major losses during COVID. But the downtowns, which have been the center of communities across Nassau County, have in many cases been suffering, including in Great Neck, like Middle Neck Road. There were many empty storefronts before COVID, and COVID only made the situation worse. There is some money now helping out. That's available. What do you think? What do you think? What else can the county do to assist in helping downtowns?
Well, we are using part of the American Rescue Plan money for Boost Nassau. So if a business feels they're qualified and could apply to get funding from the government that is going towards small business, they're welcome to apply. And there's a Boost Nassau website. I walked around door to door and told storekeepers about it. There was webinars, there's people they could talk to, they could go online, get information. So that's one way the county is trying to help out. A lot of, as you know, a lot of the issues dealing with downtown areas is zoning, and it falls into the local villages domain. So a lot of it is in control of the local village. Then it's up to residents and community groups to try to come up with ideas, go to meetings, make suggestions. I know I've worked, there's a group in Great Neck now called Destination Great Neck, which is trying to build on social media to get people to come and shop and enjoy the downtowns. They partner with like the Gold Coast Art Center and bringing art to empty storefronts, just all sorts of creative ways to help downtowns get back on their feet. And as you said, this problem has been going on before COVID. There were a lot of empty stores. So COVID did exacerbate it, and people had to adapt their businesses and do a lot more online marketing. There was a program with Hofstra University, as you know, where storekeepers could go and free of service take online marketing courses and learn how to do business online. So I think stores have to change, retail, downtowns have to change with the times. And I think it's not just COVID, it's just moving forward in this time with so many online sales available and the giants, Amazon. So it's very difficult. So what you see is mostly restaurants and service providers.
One of the areas or businesses that have been particularly hurt during COVID have been restaurants. But even before, again, the pandemic, one of the problems that was identified, our newspapers have hosted 2 forums on downtown revitalization. And in both of those, it was pointed out, and in fact, Rich Nicolello, the presiding officer, was one of our panelists at the first one, and acknowledged part of the process for a restaurant, no matter where you are, whether you're in a village or not, the county does the fire inspection that all restaurants get. And there are long delays often, or on occasion, or more than occasion, because of fire inspection. So I could have everything done and we don't have it. And presiding officer Nicolello acknowledged the reason is you don't have enough fire inspectors. Now, this problem is continuing. Why not get more fire inspectors, particularly at this time, because any delay in opening up is money. If I am a restaurant owner, and I haven't opened, I'm still paying the rent. I may be paying a utility. Time is money. Can you tell me, is the legislature doing anything with that? Because this seems to be a chronic issue with the county, that fire inspections are delayed because of a lack of fire inspectors.
Well, I have heard it as well, and I'm going to check, as I explained, we're doing the budget hearings right now, so this is the perfect time for me to investigate whether there are lines of, there's extra revenue being put aside into personnel, and I don't know the answer for that, but I'd be glad to check on it. And I agree that there should be no holdup because of the problem of having a fire inspector come to give you the final, certificate you need to open your restaurant or a business. So that to me would be a place where revenues could be used. So I am definitely going to check the budget and see if there's extra money on this line. Because there shouldn't be any holdups for that. Similarly, if somebody is applying for anything, through, like for a contractor's license or any kind of licensing in Nassau County, they should be able to get it. And there shouldn't be any delays if people need to get certificates or licenses. So I have been aware of holdups, and this is something that is concerning.
There's also, and this is, I will acknowledge this up front. I will make a full disclosure here. I'm on the board of the Gold Coast Art Center. You mentioned it. The building they're in has been sold, and there are plans for redevelopment. There are a number of people that are involved. It's obviously in one of the villages, the village of Great Neck Plaza. The town of North Hempstead is the landlord and owns, I think, the space, or has the lease on the space. But the people who own the building, which used to house the Squire Theater, a movie theater, there's no longer a movie theater. We've seen movie theaters closing throughout. We've seen it going, but this was the Squire Theater, and the Gold Coast Art Center has been a magnet for people coming in, dining, seeing events there. But now that is spread. Now there's also an opportunity to have movies in there, and even live entertainment. Would you support funding or some other support, say from the IDA, which is involved, in doing that in other entertainment venues around the county, which have also been obviously impacted significantly by COVID?
Yes, I think entertainment is definitely something that draws people to a community, not just the residents of the community, but people from outside the community who would go to an entertainment venue, who would go to an art school, who would go to a special event. And that's what downtowns need. They need to bring people in, and presumably the people who will come for that event will use other neighboring, like you said, restaurants, or just walk in the community and get to know it. So I am aware of the project, and I know parking is a premium, and I have heard that there would be a multi-tiered parking lot that goes along with those plans. So that's something else that would need approval. And I know that is one of the biggest detriments to a congested downtown area is parking. And if people can't come and have an easy place to park in, it might be a deterrent. So I realize there's a lot of different factors that go into planning something, and there's a lot of approvals that are needed along the way. But I am in favor of trying to establish something that will be a destination so that people will want to come into the downtown. Yes.
The other part, and that kind of goes hand in hand, and this has mostly to do with town and village. What role does the county have in encouraging transit-oriented development, which provides also some affordable housing in an area that doesn't have much affordable housing, but also kind of avoids some of that traffic parking issue by building units that are close to transportation for people who may be working in Manhattan or other places? What role does the county have in encouraging and developing that?
Well, most of the major roads in Great Neck and in a lot of communities are county roads, because Middle Neck Road, Grace Avenue, Bayview, East Shore Road, then you have your state roads. So anything built on a county road has to be ultimately approved, the 239F process about how to, curb cuts or anything that would affect waterways. But more to your question about transit-oriented, the Nassau County bus system, NICE, is, partially it's Nassau County financed. And I think it's important to keep a bus system up and running, and I've always fought against cuts for that. Yes, we have to think of ways outside of just having people drive their cars every place they need to go. When I first lived in Great Neck, I lived on Grace Avenue. And what I enjoyed most was being able to walk to the train, being able to commute, being able to go to local parks, being able to walk into the downtown area, do my shopping, meet people, to eat at a restaurant. So I think you really do need to create what they call these cool downtowns with things that would attract younger people who might want be looking for a community to live in. And you do need to have some kind of housing that people could afford to live in. So it can't just be all luxury housing. It has to be affordable apartments. Mixed use, having stores on the first floor and residential above. That's a smart development for downtown areas. So
what can the county do to improve it? I mean, there are projects, again, the county IDA has provided financial assistance on some of those. Are there any other opportunities, or is that the main way that can be done?
Yeah, most of the issues really do have to be dealt with by the local villages. The Planning Commission of Nassau County does give their review of a building on a county road, and that goes back to the village. So that's the county's involvement, but most of these projects are in the local domain.
At the risk of self-promotion or promotion of our industry, the city of New York, well, actually, Mayor de Blasio actually had an executive order that required that at least half of the money spent on advertising for the city of New York go to community and ethnic newspapers, which also have been suffering a great deal in recent years at the hands of folks like Google and particularly Facebook, which of recent I have pointed out in our paper as recently as last week. Newspapers are publishers, and we're liable for what's published in our newspapers, and we provide a valuable service by doing that. Where Facebook is allowed to and has been promoting misinformation, disinformation, and in fact, they've been doing it on purpose, running algorithms to basically fan the flames, because they get more people to interact on the site. So would you be in favor of legislation or an executive order that would require X amount of dollars that go to community newspapers and ethnic newspapers in Nassau County?
I mean, I wasn't familiar with the New York City legislation, so I'd have to read it, but it does sound like a way that it would help infuse money into local papers such as yourself. I know what you're saying with Facebook. I've read a lot about that, and there's a lot of issues with the way news is being presented. But the reality is now that most younger generation people are just getting their information online. So, I mean, newspapers, I know Blank Slate is online. You have all your publications as well. But the paper industry, the print industry, does not seem like it's a growing industry in terms of the population. I think most older people may be reading newspapers and books, but most younger people read everything online. So I think there has to be a way. I'd have to see what New York City has done. Does this also help with the online versions?
Yeah, it does, and just to note, one of the big issues, and this goes back to the issue with Facebook and Google. 65% of all the digital revenue in the United States goes to Facebook and Google.
Huh.
Two companies get it, and 90% of the new revenue go to Facebook and Google. So this is a national issue, and it is being addressed. But that was the way that New York City responded. We won't spend much time on that, but we'll point out that Facebook has more than its share of problems at the moment.
Yeah. Did you see the way it just shut off yesterday for 5 hours?
Well, we also saw the testimony on 60 Minutes and what's come out on the fact that from one of the whistleblowers who were saying that they're using algorithms that purposely, that they could tamp down the disinformation if they wanted to, but they're not doing it because it would hurt their bottom line. So something to think about. Okay, Rob, have I missed any of the issues or is there anything you would like to ask, Ellen?
Nope, covered it all.
Okay, Ellen, so let me let you cap it off and ask you why voters going to the polls this November should vote to re-elect you.
Okay, well, thank you. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you and to address the issues facing Nassau County. I am a full-time legislator. I come to my office almost every day. I spend much of my time talking directly to constituents. I answer phone calls. I am out in the community. I belong to several community organizations, and I consider Nassau, where I grew up and have lived my whole life, to be the best place to live. And the reason I am an elected official is just to make our communities better, to improve it, to make it, to fix any problems we have, and to plan for the future, to try to make Nassau, well, as we know, it is the safest community in the country for its size, and I'm so proud of that. And I really take pride in the fact that I helped to reopen the 6th precinct, which is located on Community Drive in Manhasset. I fought for that for years because I never understood consolidation of police districts. We want to make our homes safer. Public safety is crucial, and I think we have to protect our environment, our water. There's a lot of things we still need to do in Nassau, and it's very important to study the budget and to know where your tax dollars are going. And I do have a background in finance. I have an MBA, and I try to use that in looking over the budgets and all the different expenditures and revenues. And I have a proven record for getting things done. I will fight for my community. I will fight for Nassau County. I just recently got capital funding for the local water pollution control district to do a feasibility study to add more homes into its district so we could have less cesspools, more sewers. I am trying to make our community a healthy, safe place for all people to live.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Ellen Birnbaum, the Nassau County legislator for the 10th district and candidate for re-election, for taking the time with us today, as well as those who attended. Thank Northwell Health, our sponsor, Rob Pelez, for making things go smoothly here. For those who didn't watch with us today, a recording of this discussion can be found on Blank Slate Media website, theislandnow.com, our Facebook page, and our YouTube channel. We invite you to sign up for that. You'll be able to go to the YouTube channel directly or by clicking on a link on the island now. And once again, I thank Ellen Birnbaum for taking the time and having this discussion.